Hey 3DMJers, welcome back to Anecdotes and Observations. I'm here with Mike Israetel, and he's going to join us on AO today, pronounced...
AO today. Was I supposed to say that today?
Yes. Yes, you were. And I have the fortune of being here at the Ultimate Evidence-Based Conference in Melbourne. We've had a lot of time to pick each other's brains and noses.
Yes.
And we've had a lot of fun kind of theorizing, scheming on Greg Knuckles and doing other things together.
It's gonna take the two of us plus Krieger probably to take Greg Knuckles down. Who knows?
Or just Krieger.
True. Just get out of my way.
Yeah, he's like, I got this.
That's right.
Anyway, so what I wanted to talk to you about today, Mike, is just to ask you, because I know you're a pretty heavy science guy, but also you do a lot of application, is just some anecdote or observation that you've seen that is a reliably useful anecdote that you've used that you want to share with all them Team 3DMJers out in the YouTube lands.
Not near YouTube. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure.
All right. So, it's been my whole volume landmarks business. So we've defined sort of how you reach your maximum recoverable volume is when you physically can't recover anymore to produce as much like rep strength the next week. This is exclusively for hypertrophy for this discussion.
So MRV is defined by the point at which strength cannot recover to previous levels.
Correct. So
week.
like let's say last week you did 225 for like sets of 10 in the bench and they were all pretty close grinders. If you do 230 the next week and you get like 8, 6, 1, 1, 1, like you not clearly, but probably exceeded how much volume you could recover from in that time frame.
Or at least training stress.
Totally. And then, so like, but if you repeat that several mesocycles in a row and every time you get to around 20-ish or 22 or 24 sets, you hit the wall again, like there's probably a wall there. There's just too much volume for you to chronically handle under good recoverable average conditions. Like, and sometimes you 18 sets because, you know, you had like divorce in the middle of the shit, or sometimes it's 24 because you married in the middle of the shit, but it's somewhere in there, and of course it's all the range, it's not one number, right?
Right.
So for that reason, MRV is like pretty straightforward to figure out because you're like, well shit, but there's a ceiling. If you hit it and you're done. Performance is easy to measure. We all write down our reps, like we all, on a final week of an accumulation phase, tend to train pretty hard, so we know like we didn't just leave a shitload in the tank by accident. So in that way, sort of finding MRV and measuring it real world and updating it seems to be relatively easy.
Okay.
Minimum effective volume requires an assessment of, am I getting anything out of this training as far as any muscle growth north of maintenance?
Right.
Is there any kind of long-term muscle growth happening? That's a lot harder to figure out. The way to figure that out is through multiple phases of seeing if your rep strength improves from one cycle to another cycle. But you've got to do like 3 or 4 phases back to back to back of incrementally lower volumes to see where your floor is. And the first time you actually get weaker or just maintain, like if you do sets of 10 with a certain thing in the squat, and then a month later you're doing sets of 10 with the exact same thing, then clearly there was no effect because your rep strength didn't improve.
So
the rep strength as a proxy for muscle
numbers.
size. Exactly. So you know like that's your area. But that takes a while. So, and when you insert exercises every couple of mesocycles, you put in new ones, you maybe don't have time to find the individual exercise minimum effective volume. So we have a proxy at RP we have RP Plus, like a members thing where James and I answer questions. We kind of have a proxy system for how do you know if maybe you're at minimum effective volume or above for hypertrophy, not for strength. For strength to be different.
Right.
So here it is. Here's our guess. So I'll list 3 things and I kind of describe them. Number 1, did the workout make you sore?
Okay.
Number 2, did you get a pump at all? Number 3, was the workout at all challenging in any way? If you could say subjectively, like it was in an RPE 7 or above.
Sure.
As a workout, which is tough to gauge.
So the sessional RPE.
The session. And if you really think about it, if you want to express your volumes per week, you look back at the whole first week of your training block and think back chest. On average, was I like pretty well fucked by it? Or was I just like could have done double the work and not even noticed, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. If you did or didn't get sore by itself tells you dick. I mean, you could be over your MRV and never get sore.
Yeah.
And if you get pretty well sore, you could just be, you know, something even at maintenance volume might make you sore, right?
Right.
You can get sore from one set of RDLs, whatever, but that's probably not enough to grow you. It's just shock damage. So by itself.
Can I ask you a question? So I know I'm thinking this. I know probably some listeners are probably thinking any one of these alone probably doesn't tell me anything, or all the times where this wouldn't work.
Yep.
But I'm assuming you mean that if I have fixed all other program variables and the only thing I'm adjusting is the volume, same rep ranges, exercises, all that stuff.
Yes.
Then these become very useful factors.
Or even new exercises. So for example, you get a new set of exercises together and you kind of don't know where to start with them. So you start them somewhere at some random volumes. If an exercise or like a week of training for a body part, all the exercises used for it, let's say you have a couple new ones in there, if you just didn't get sore at all, you got no pump, like literally, you ever been in the gym trained like so little, and like maybe there's not enough time to train, you got zero pump and you had to leave, and people were like, how was your workout? You're like, it wasn't really a workout.
It's called contest prep.
That's right. For sure. Hey, you think you're growing during that time? No, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So no soreness at all, no pump at all, and it felt super fucking easy. If you can say that about your training week for a body part, you're probably not doing enough to grow.
Right.
And the thing is, I hope to God I'm wrong, because wouldn't it be sweet if you could grow and get none of those? I would only train like that for forever.
Just do 1 set of 5 to 75%.
That's it. That's probably too little.
Yeah.
If a couple of them are there, maybe it's above minimum effective volume, maybe not. If all 3 of them are there, then you're for sure above minimum effective volume in most cases. If you're getting sore, if you're getting a pump, and if it's fucking pretty hard, you're probably doing a pretty fucking good job, and you're probably growing some muscle.
Sure.
Now, is it maximum muscle? No. But then you can start sort of there and go up. Another way we use it, so we use it to say, okay, are you for sure at least as high as minimum effective volume? If you're hitting none of those, like someone will be like, I don't know if I'm above MEV for like my quad training. We're like, how was your quad training? Did you get sore? Did you get a pump? Was it hard? They're like, no. They're like, you probably need to do more, right?
Right.
On the other hand, some people are like, hey, first week, I couldn't walk. The pump was so bad I couldn't bend my legs, and it was a religious effort to get the sets done. We're like, you're like at your MRV week 1.
Yeah.
Where are you going to progress to? So basically, we instruct people, ideally, on average, like super just rough, if you have to start anywhere, tracking your own previous performance is best, but things change. A very tiny level of soreness, or not at all, to start with a mesocycle.
Right.
It might increase as you increase volume. Minimum to small amount of soreness. A little bitty pump. Nothing fucking, like if you're for week 1 and you're like, fuck, like what are you gonna do in week 3? Like, you're just gonna blow up or something? Which would be kind of sweet. Overcooked hot dog muscle. Getting a little bit sore, a little bitty pump, and feeling the swag a little bit. You're like, all right, workout, I see you, but it's not a big deal. Then in the next week, it's going to be harder and harder and harder until you deload, and it's going to, week 4 or 3 or whatever, however long your accumulation is, religious effort, and you're done. And then you recycle, repeat.
Right.
So it's basically like, if you hit those, just barely nick every one, you're probably around the general minimum effective volume.
Right.
And you'll notice that as you get more trained over the years, those things are harder to do, and that reflects the reality that minimum effective volumes rise over time. So if you're a really good bodybuilder, not everything you, 1 set of RDLs doesn't get you sore anymore. Like, no matter what, you have to take weeks off. And then it is your minimum effective volume because you're rebuilding lost muscle, right? So you're not just going to get sore from everything. You don't just get pumped unless you really have a good workout, and maybe when you're hypercaloric, right? Some people say, how do you know, at least in part, if you're gaining muscle on a contest prep or a diet, or if you're the kind of advanced individual or shitty genetics or whatever combination of those, that you're either losing muscle or for sure not gaining? Like, are you getting sore? Are you getting pumps? And are the workouts feeling like super productive? Because on a contest prep, for goddamn sure, none of those really happening. You might get sore, but it's not like like the super pump DOMs, like day later, like, oh shit. It's the kind of like joint/connective tissue soreness where you're like, just kill me. It's like a degrading sort of. So it's one of those things where, if you're not getting those gnarly pumps, you'd be like, well, I never get them on contest prep. Like, do you think you're growing on contest prep? It's like, you're right, I probably not. So, and of course, there's a direct self-swelling effect of hypertrophy too. So these aren't by accident, right? And I mean, for sure want to be careful with the DOMS part, because, DOMS is not exactly a one-to-one relationship to hypertrophy.
No, it's also based on perception too.
Totally. And I would say that there's probably, the last week of training may be a time to get crazy DOMs. I think at every other time it interferes with what you're going to do next week at the very least, and it's probably from a variety of studies, like too much damage, not enough resources for growth. The body's just busy fixing itself. So I think, but I also think that if you fear DOMs, like we were talking about earlier, and you never get DOMs, you might never train hard enough to do anything. And you're like, here's your effective volume range, here's where you start to get DOMs.
Yeah.
You'll just never get into it. Like,
I do think a lot of that also comes down to the way, like your training history and the way you've done things. We've talked a lot about frequency here at UEBC, and we kind of came to the conclusion with James's amazing presentation that almost any frequency can work so long as the volume is appropriate and appropriately distributed.
Yeah.
And I would suspect that someone who has been using a higher frequency approach, say 3 or 4 times per week per muscle group, they're probably on average going to get less DOMs, even if you have the same volume.
Yes. What I would say to that is they might get a little bit of DOMs one day, a little bit of DOMs another day, a little bit of DOMs another day. But if you summate those, it might be the same amount of DOMs someone gets for the day after their full body training. It might not summate to that much.
Well, even if it
but
does,
they might get more pumps.
Okay.
They might have more total exertion of effort.
Mm-hmm.
Like it might be technically harder to show up to the gym that many times and do 5 sets than it would just be get it all done at one time.
Right.
But I mean, maybe those factors can overcompensate and have the same result in growth.
I think you're right. I think the issue then just comes down to if you were someone who is taking that approach and you're getting a very small amount of perceived soreness after each workout, it may be below your perceptive ability to get the granularity to actually assess it.
Sure.
So yeah, I think what I would recommend to anyone listening is really try to keep a lot of variables static when you are trying to assess these things, or it's going to be very difficult to really get that subjective gauge.
100%, 100%. But the good thing is there's a couple of variables, right?
Right.
And it's one of those, like, when someone presents us a sort of mixed factor analysis, they're like, well, I've got the soreness, but I don't have this, or I have this, I don't have that. We start to be like, yeah, I don't know. But we can tell you 2 things with a high likelihood. If you have no soreness, no pump, and you perceive no effort, you're probably not working hard enough. If you perceived a religious level of effort, your pump almost killed you, and your DOMS is like around 6 days later, you're probably doing too much.
Right.
So
and everything else is somewhere in between.
That's it. So minimum effective volume should probably be all of those at their minimum effect. MRV, when you hit it, you'll probably have to push all these close to their, like, I'm uncomfortable sorts of limits.
Right.
That's it.
Makes sense. And I think we've talked a lot about systems here as well, and that's a useful way to maybe a little more quickly get close to something. Because if you take a purely hardline data-driven approach, you might go, right, I only want to have enough data until I know when my rep PRs and my 1RM strength, depending on what your goal is, has changed. But that might take an extra 3-4 months.
Yeah.
So I think, no, this isn't a perfect system, but what it does do, it might get you there a little earlier. You might spend a couple weeks finagling things and going, oh, I didn't have that right, or I need to modify my perception, versus waiting 3 months before you have enough performance data.
Yeah, and living individuals, data collection occurs at the same time as optimization. So you can't just wait on the shit. Be like, hey, I finally know my body 10 years later. Time to start training. Like,
Exactly.
All right.
Yep. Yeah. Great. Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
And one more time for the camera, this has been Anecdotes and Observations. That's
Ayo.
And we'll take that and accept it because that's what it is.
I was late.
See you guys next time.